Well, hey folks, welcome to my YouTube channel, Self-Evident. My topic today is, face it folks, under Donald Trump, we are the United States of Israel. This is going to be a little longer than my normal essays, but there's just a lot to say about this. So let's get with it. To say Donald Trump's war on Iran has more to do with providing a distraction from the Epstein pedophile scandal than anything else is only partially accurate. Another main motive is Trump is doing the bidding of Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the hardliner Likud party. In case you've missed the Great Awakening, the agreement by center-left and center-right podcasters of this last month, under Trump, we are the United States of Israel. Our flag's 5-pointed stars should have 6 points, signifying the complete ownership of America by King David's Israel. The degree that Trump is in cahoots with Israel's prime minister and Zionism is the subject of the rest of this article. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to assume you're already up to speed on the history of Israel, know something about Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, the Jewish diaspora, and the desire to return to what they consider their homeland, Israel, or in ancient biblical text, Canaan. In case some of you might need a refresher, in 1987, Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, and was elected president of the Zionist organization. I'm sure it is only a coincidence that the Bank of International Settlements, the central bank, is also located in Basel. I must not get ahead of myself. The key thing here is Palestine was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire at the outset of the Great War, World War I. Which officially concluded in 1918. A year earlier, British Foreign Secretary Lord Balfour wrote a declaration to Lord Rothschild. This was in 1917. In the transcript of this, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and the religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. And I must point out that the Balfour Declaration was co-signed by Lord Walter Rothschild, Arthur Balfour, Leo Amory, and Lord Milner. Alfred Milner assumed control over this group of powerful British aristocrats, which became the Milner Group. Originally, this collection of British lords, financiers, and industrialists were funded by Cecil Rhodes, infamous for the blood diamond mines in Africa. When Rhodes passed on, Milner took over and more funding came from international bankers like Lord Rothschild and J.P. Morgan, as well as the Rockefeller family. This information is readily available today, but was brought to the academic crowd by Georgetown University historian Carroll Quigley, who was Bill Clinton's professor. And Quigley notes, Quigley notes that many presidential elections were heavily influenced on one side by J.P. Morgan interest and on the other side by Rockefeller interest. Either way, the Milner Group won in a sense. Quigley even notes how wise it is for the Milner Group, not the public, to have virtually the same political agenda on both sides, political parties that is, so that when the public gets tired of one politician, they can vote in the opposing side without derailing the agenda of the power structure, largely the Milner Group, which we now call the Uniparty. The reason I'm dredging up this boilerplate but true conspiracy theorist history is because Donald Trump convinced a lot of people, maybe 77 million, that he was not going to be one of those deep state puppets. He was going to drain the swamp of the New World Order, the deep state salamanders that continually infest Washington, D.C. politics. And far too many bought into his sales pitch. But it's apparent now, the Donald Trump administration is a deep state infested cesspool, turned rancid and putrid with the corruption and cronyism like the world has never seen before. Remember, Israel started as a result of the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, and Trump's administration and his state media, Fox, is overwhelmingly staffed with hardcore Zionists. Before I name names, let's get something out of the way. I'm not anti-Semitic. I disregard all institutionalized religions equally. Even though I find many wonderful stories and moral lessons in the Bible, I've actually studied the Bible critically and cannot believe any rational adult today believes the demented nonsense in the Bible as opposed to the good stuff in the Bible. There's a lot of demented nonsense, impossible, ridiculous stuff in the Bible, and it should not be taken literally. As far as the New Testament goes, I think Jesus was misrepresented by the Roman Paul, who never knew Jesus, and, well, I'll save that for later. I think the Holocaust was real and unfathomably atrocious. I think Israel has a right to exist as a state of Palestine, but doesn't have a right to encroach on agreed upon borders. Israel has a right to defend itself, but not the right to scourge an entire people and the geography upon which they live and have lived for thousands of years. The people who insist that criticism of Israel's politics, is tantamount to being anti-Semitic have to admit that they believe Israel is a theocracy and not a democratic parliament, i.e., a secular government. Many American and Israeli supporters decry Sharia law theocracy of Iran and neighboring Muslim countries while maintaining the Torah, the Talmud, and the Kabbalah of Judaism are the foundation of Jewish culture and law to this day. Make up your mind, Israel. Are you a theocracy or a secular government? When I and many others in a growing chorus refer to Zionists in the pejorative from America's perspective, we are not referring to Jews. We are referring to Jews and non-Jews who seem to think America exists to provide money, weapons, and support for the radical Zionists in Israel who dream of a greater Israel, that is, a greatly expanded geography for Israel. The influence of Zionism is radically disproportionate to the population of the U.S., but matches up well with the distribution of wealth in the U.S. As my favorite Jew, Bernie Sanders, not a Zionist, a man I voted for president, has said many times, 3 or 4 billionaires in America have as much wealth as over half the entire population. That hyper-concentration of wealth by the few versus the sword of Damocles' debt that plagues the masses is a manifestation of the deep state. The Trump administration isn't just infested with Make Israel Great Again Zionists. Many of those same people are also billionaires, and billionaires attract cowardly, materialistic sycophants. Not all Zionists are Jewish, but Trump's most influential backers are Zionists just the same, because when you boil it down, screw the Bible, their real religion is the love of money and power and the envy and adoration that comes with it. Oh, and let's not forget the mansions, the yachts, and the private jets. Which brings us to the Zionist-dominated Congress of the United States. The AIPAC influence over Congress is overwhelming, to the point that once you view the chart I've linked below, which is called Track AIPAC, in the description there's no more wondering why doesn't someone remove that clown from office. It's obvious. The reason Trump can get away with almost anything is because the most powerful people, the deep state types, want him in office because he's so compromised by Israel and Russia and the Epstein pedophile scandal that he will do whatever he is told as long as you praise him and tell him how wonderful he is and how much you like him. If that doesn't do it, give him a made-up award, a shiny gold trophy, and the U.S. military is at your service. A quick review of this Iran debacle. Way back in July, Trump sent in B-2 stealth bombers from Nebraska to Iran to bomb their nuclear sites, and according to Trump, completely obliterated them, giving War Chief Pete Hegseth and Trump the chest-bumping military success they so craved. But let's not forget, the reason Iran may or may not have been enriching uranium to weapons-grade concentrations was because during Trump's first term, he essentially tore up Barack Obama's Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, nuclear treaty, the JCPOA nuclear treaty with Iran, which for the most part was accomplishing the goal of restricting Iran's nuclear fissile material potency and allowing international inspections and verification. Since Israel laid much of the blame for the Hamas-led attack of October 7, 2023 on Iran as the world's greatest sponsor of terror, their concern that Iran was going to eventually nuke them was not without merit. But of course, there's more to the story, and more is provided by the Times of Israel on August 29, 2024. Netanyahu's opposition leader Yair Lapid testified on Thursday that it's not true that the political system was not alerted to the October 7 disaster. For months, the Prime Minister and cabinet ministers received a series of severe and unprecedented warnings and did nothing, Lapid told members of the commission, which was recently established by groups representing survivors and victims of the massacre in the wake of Netanyahu's refusal to establish an official state probe. What Lapid might be referring to is a foreknowledge of the attack as reported by the New York Times, which alleges Israel obtained Hamas plans for its assault on October 7th over a year before the devastating attack. But despite the document being seen by several senior officials, it was not acted upon. According to the report, the 40-page plan dubbed Jericho Wall laid out almost exactly how Hamas eventually wound up carrying out the attack. The Times wrote, the document called for a barrage of rockets at the outset of the attack, drones to knock out the security cameras, and automated machine guns along the border, and gunmen to pour into Israel en masse in paragliders, on motorcycles, and on foot, all of which happened on October the 7th. The document also showed that Hamas had access to sensitive Israel military information, but officials determined that the terror group was incapable of carrying out an assault of such a large scope, or possibly unwilling, and dismissed concerns about it. The Times claimed that in one instance a soldier noticed that Hamas training exercise appeared to dovetail with plans detailed in the report, but a commander said that the drill was part of a totally imaginative scenario and did not point to actual battle plans. The above excerpt came from the Times of Israel on December 1st, 2023. In any case, we know what followed and is still going on: complete and utter destruction of Gaza, the West Bank, and now Israel is determined to flatten the southern portion of Lebanon, which, by the way, has stalled the blink and you missed it Iran ceasefire. So back to draining the swamp of the deep state, the New World Order globalists. Why is the corruption worse than ever? Could it be because the Trump administration is nearly 100% populated by the deep state? By deep state Israel-first actors? Well, let's start with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who we all know is married to Trump's daughter, Ivanka. Jared is the son of Charles Kushner, who is an American Jew and disgraced billionaire, a real estate developer who was convicted of illegal campaign contributions, tax evasion, and witness tampering, and was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. He later received a pardon issued by his son's father-in-law, President Trump, on December 23, 2020. Charles Kushner has donated a significant amount to Trump's campaigns. Previously, he was a major Democratic Party donor, and this will all make sense once you open up the charts in Track APAC. The link is below. There is far too much to know about Jared Kushner for this article, about his dubious real estate dealings with Middle East potentates, about the family's crypto Ponzi schemes, about the Gaza peace plan, the billion-dollar buy a piece of Gaza plan. This thinly disguised real estate land rush was negotiated by Britain former Prime Minister Tony Blair, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff. But before we get to Witkoff, a fun fact: the Kushners and Benjamin Netanyahu were so close that Netanyahu actually slept in Jared Kushner's bed a time or two when visiting the U.S. of Israel. Of course, that was before Ivanka Trump, a.k.a. Ivanka Kushner, slept in his bed and converted to Judaism, something Daddy was proud to proclaim to the Knesset, a.k.a. the Jewish Parliament, on October the 13th, 2025. How interesting that Friday, October the 13th, 1307, is the day the French King Philip IV and Clement V and Pope Clement V collaborated and essentially destroyed the Knights Templars throughout Europe, till they rose again as the world's banksters. Another story for another time. But for this piece, suffice to say, Ivanka was officially senior advisor to the president during Trump's first term, meaning we taxpayers paid her. Now, Steve Witkoff's official title is Special Envoy to the Middle East. Now, we're talking about people in the Trump administration. Ivanka, Jared Kushner, now Steve Witkoff, they're all Zionists, all pro-Israel, heavy pro-Israel, and they're all in the Trump administration that was going to drain the swamp. All right, let's get back to it here. Steve Witkoff's official title is Special Envoy to the Middle East. But Russia must be the Middle East because Witkoff and Jared Kushner seem to be able to negotiate virtually nothing of any benefit to ending the Russia-Ukrainian war. But lack of success at something they know nothing about is not a deal breaker for Team Trump. We'll get them next time, boys. And surprise Witkoff, one of Trump's golfing buddies, another real estate tycoon, and a billionaire, is also Jewish, a deep state Zionist entrenched in the Trump administration. According to Larry C. Johnson, a former CIA analyst, look him up, both Kushner and Witkoff are Mossad assets. Working on behalf of Israel's interests, Mossad assets working on behalf of Israel's interest, not America First interest, Israel's interest. According to talk show host Tom Hartman, look him up, Kushner and Witkoff were deliberately pretending to meet and negotiate with the Iranians in order to aid in their targeting by U.S. and Israel forces, which turned out to be accurate intel. Trump's Vice President, J.D. Vance, is known as Peter Thiel's boy protege, his asset in the White House. But Vance has steadfastly supported Israel and approved Trump's support of Israel, moving the American embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And oh yeah, we almost forgot about that. As far as supporting Trump's Iran's war, Vance has taken both sides depending on who's asking. In 2023, at the Zionists of America Awards dinner, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, received the Dr. Miriam and Sheldon G. Adelson Defender of Israel Award after he was introduced to the cheering crowd by the chair of the Republican Conference, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, and philanthropist and great friend of ZOA, Zionists of America, Dr. Miriam Adelson. And if you go to the website Track AIPAC, you can view charts of the Congress critters receiving AIPAC donations, and you can also find a list of the rich Zionists who give money to AIPAC so that AIPAC can buy Congress critters. First on the list is some guy named John Kuhn, who runs WhatsApp. Second on the list of billionaire donors to AIPAC is Miriam Adelson, wife of deceased Las Vegas mogul, Zionist, billionaire, and perennial Republican Party contributor Sheldon Adelson. You may recall when Trump occasionally makes noise about ignoring the Constitution and running or assuming a third term. It was Miriam Adelson who said she'd give him $200 million for his bid to stay Israel's #1 asset in the United States. Now we come to Stephen Miller is the White House's Deputy Chief of Staff. Yes, we're paying his salary too. He's notorious and hated by all for his severe architecture of immigration policies. Yes, he's an Israel-first Jewish Zionist. I hope you're all seeing the pattern developing here, especially in the echo of Make America Great Again. And straight out of the mouth of online magazine Jewish News, David Friedman worked as Trump's bankruptcy lawyer before 2016. He was ambassador to Israel during his first administration. Friedman did not have foreign policy experience before becoming ambassador in 2017 and had been a supporter of Israel's West Bank settlement before entering office. As ambassador, he was a key part of the team that fulfilled a long wish list of Israeli government priorities, from moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem to brokering the Abraham Accords. In this term, Trump's hand-picked ambassador to Israel, I didn't say whose hand did the picking, is Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee, the former governor of Arkansas and U.S. ambassador to Israel, has consistently expressed his unwavering support for Israel throughout his political career. He believes Israel holds a special place in the hearts of many Christians, viewing it as a fulfillment of biblical promises. Huckabee has stated, "I love Israel because God loves Israel," emphasizing the spiritual connection he feels toward the country. And I got to add here, God loves Israel. It says that in the Bible because the Bible was written by the Jews. So the Jewish Bible says that the Jews are God's special people. Huh. Funny how that works. Wait, how do we know God loves Israel? Oh yeah, I remember now. It was written that God loves the Jews more than any other, and that writing is found. Oh yeah, I guess I already wrote that. Huckabee has actively promoted policies that align with Israel's interests, advocating for the relocation of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and supporting Israel's right to defend itself against threats. His political stance is characterized by a strong alignment with evangelical Christian values, which often emphasize support for Israel as a key aspect to faith. In other words, Christian nationalist fundamentalism, the Bible is the inerrant word of God, even the woman from man's rib part, even the God getting pissed off and drowning everybody, even the part about Lot offering up his virgin daughters to a mob to be gang raped. But what are the Christians and Jews going to do in the Armageddon end times? Jews think only they are chosen. Christians believe one has to believe in Jesus is Lord and Savior, and without this belief you are going to hell, not necessarily in a handbasket. This happy Judeo-Christian self-righteousness party will get rude. Huckabee's relationship with Israel is not just political. He has visited Israel over 100 times and has led numerous tours for evangelical Christians, fostering a sense of solidarity and support for the Jewish people. Excuse me, Mr. Huckabee, I thought this was America first. Let's see who's next. How about Jewish Zionist billionaire Howard Lutnick? And I'm not going to use the twist on his word and call him Nutlick. Lutnick? Or is it Nutlick? Let me see. Nutlick. No, it's Lutnick. It is Lutnick. He's currently getting paid a salary and health benefits by the taxpayers of the United States. Now we're paying these Zionists out of American taxpayer money. America-first taxpayer. No, okay, it's not working. Lutnick is the 41st United States Secretary of Commerce under President Donald Trump and was sworn in on February 2025. In his cabinet-level role, he advises on economic, trade, and industrial policy and directs U.S. taxpayer support for Israel's settler colonial project amid its ongoing genocide in Gaza. You must have heard lots of nasty stuff about him by now and may remember his sheepishly standing in Trump's office while Trump mentioned how lucky he was not to have gone to work in one of the Twin Towers on 9/11/01 because for the first time ever he had to take his kid to school. Over 500 of his employees at the finance center of Cantor Fitzgerald perished that day. Lucky Lutnick joins Lucky Larry Silverstein, the owner of the WC Complex and WT7, who also picked the best day of his life to have a prior commitment. He had to go to the dermatologist, both lucky, both turning tragedy into billions. Lutnick is a supporter of pro-Israel causes, including the first responder group United Hatzalah and Birthright, which organizes free 10-day trips to the country. A New York native, Lutnick accompanied Trump to the grave of the late spiritual leader of the Chabad Lubavitch Hasidic movement, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, last month. Lutnick has consistently amplified Zionist propaganda by insisting that every discussion of Gaza must begin with the October 7, 2023 events, deliberately obscuring Israel's deployment of the Hannibal Directive, look it up, and the Jericho Wall mentioned earlier. Through philanthropy, Lutnick directly enables Israel's settler colonialism. He and his wife, Allison, have donated millions to United Hatzalah, an Israel Emergency Services organization tied to occupation efforts, including a $7 million pledge in July 2024 to support families affected by October 7 and expand its capabilities amid the conflict. They have also contributed over $1 million to Birthright Israel, which normalizes the occupation by facilitating trips for young Jews to connect with and potentially settle in occupied Palestine, displacing Palestinians and erasing their indigenous presence. So instead of MAGA, let's just say it's MEGA. Make Israel great again. And now let's discuss Cuban-American Marco, Little Marco in Trump's vernacular, Rubio, Marco Rubio. He is not a Jew, but he is ultra-Zionist. Whereas Bernie Sanders is a Jew, but not a Zionist, Marco Rubio wears two hats, none of which are lettered MAGA. He is Secretary of State and later was named National Security Advisor. Rubio is absolute in his belief that the Israelis must be supported even as they lay waste to humanitarian principles and international law in Gaza and Lebanon. As Vance was his sugar daddy, Peter Thiel As Vance was his sugar daddy, Peter Thiel pushing him, J.D. Vance we're talking about now, pushing him into all the power, and Trump had his billionaire friend Musk. Oh, okay, I'm just getting sidetracked here. Claiming to secure the election for him. So did Rubio benefit great. Okay. Vance had his sugar daddy, Peter Thiel, pushing him into the halls of power, and Trump had his billionaire friend Musk securing the election for him. Well, so did Rubio benefit greatly from the relationships with Jewish Zionist billionaires. That started during the 2016 Republican primaries. You know, the one where Trump called him Little Marco. Speaking to CNN's Jake Tapper in March 2016, Rubio warned, for years to come, this is Rubio speaking, for years to come, there are many people on the right, in the media, and voters at large that are going to be having to explain and justify how they fell into this trap of supporting Donald Trump. And Rubio called Trump a con artist, telling the crowd he runs on this idea that he is fighting for the little guy, but he has spent his entire career sticking it to the little guy. If you all have friends who are thinking about voting for Donald Trump, friends do not let friends vote for con artists. My, how things have changed. Rubio's sugar daddy started out with an auto dealership magnate, Norman Brahman, a past president of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. Brahman wasn't just the single largest backer of Rubio's presidential campaign, he also helped finance the young senator's legislative agenda. Employed Rubio as a lawyer, hired Rubio's wife, a former Miami Dolphins cheerleader, as a philanthropic advisor, helped fund Rubio's position as a college instructor, and insisted Rubio with his personal finances, helped Rubio with his personal finances. In 2010, Brahman and Rubio went to Israel together shortly after Rubio's election to the U.S. Senate. America first, you know. Rubio had not one, but two Jewish Zionist sugar daddies. Sheldon Adelson, who spent $100 million and $150 million of his estimated $32 billion fortune backing Republicans in the 2012 presidential campaign. Sources close to Adelson told Politico in April that the billionaire likes the Florida senator's strong stance on defense, including his strident support for Israel. And after Rubio declared he'd run for president, the Adelson-owned Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom gave Rubio coverage described as fawning. Make America great again. And now we come to Pete Hegseth. Of all the ridiculous positions held by friends of Israel, friends of Trump, Pete Hegseth, as head of the DOD, as head of the Pentagon, head of all the generals and admirals in the armed services, even those who graduated with honors from West Point, from Annapolis, and Air Force Academy, even those top-level commanders of the various regional global combat command regions, Trump chose Hegseth because Trump likes Fox and Friends, even the lesser-watched weekend version where Hegseth rode the couch, no, not that couch, and Trump liked the way Hegseth spoke fondly of him, as you know by now, because Trump has literally said it several times, even about brutal authoritarian dictators, I like people who like me. Hegseth is known to talk tough. During a Pentagon briefing on March 13th, 2026, Hegseth stated that U.S. forces would continue operations against Iran with no quarter, no mercy for our enemies. He is responsible for giving the commands to blow up outboard motorboats in the area of Venezuela waters suspected of carrying fentanyl to the U.S. and ordered the killing of 2 survivors clinging to a boat after the initial attack. This double tap and the dubious legality of killing people transporting drugs is why several Democratic legislators, notably Mark Kelly, warned U.S. servicemen to know and understand the Constitution. He stated on TV, "You can refuse illegal orders, a statement based on military law and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which makes clear that service members must not obey unlawful commands." This truth did not sit well with the Zionists in Congress. 85% of the media, most all of them. The Zionists in Congress, which is about 85% of Congress, and most of the media. Okay, so now you wonder, now you know. Hegseth, some endearingly call him Cake's Breath because of his well-publicized love of the sauce, is an avowed Christian Zionist, a latter-day crusader with the Jerusalem cross tattoo on his hairless chest. a ferocious man, should you believe his own rhetoric. He has renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War and calls his Crusader soldiers war fighters. Like Christy Gnome, the Trump orbit is filled with these pitiful cosplayers. Someone should tell him the Crusades didn't go so well for the Christian Crusaders. Hegseth's Department of War launched B-2 stealth bombers back on attack on Iran's nuclear facilities way back in June. The bombers flew all the way from their Missouri air base, needing many in-flight refuels. The bombing raids plus the Tomahawk missile strikes from Navy ships completely obliterated, this is Trump's words, and Hegseth's words, Iran's nuclear programs, boasted Trump and Hegseth, obliterated being the operative word here, as we all wonder why Trump decided to invade Iran on February 28th this year because of, well, spin the wheel and see which excuse the pointer lands on. One of them was that Iran was only a few days away from creating a nuclear bomb. But what about the last year? Oh, shut up. It's not relevant now. The reason everyone who watches Fox News doesn't understand what most everyone understands is that there can only be two main reasons Trump just had to start this war with Iran, whether he wants to call it a war or not. The Epstein's files were hovering over Trump administration like the sword of Damocles, and all those global power players who could be implicated in the debased debauchery data divulge. And of course, we all know Epstein was a Jewish Zionist running a Mossad honeypot designed explicitly to blackmail global power players while feeding Epstein's insatiable thirst for sex with minors. Trump and Hegseth attacked Iran because no other president was stupid enough to let Benjamin Netanyahu dog-walk the United States into yet another war against Israel's enemies, real or perceived. Make America great again. Pam Bondi is also vocally pro-Israel. In 2018, although she's no longer with the administration, in 2018, while serving as Florida's Attorney General, she was interviewed by Fox News' Neil Kovoto and was asked about the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And she said, Israel is one of our greatest allies in the world, if not the greatest. Bondi said as part of an interview about concerns of escalation in the Middle East, I visited Israel twice as Attorney General, and Jerusalem is Israel's capital. Reported by the Miami Herald on January 27, 2026, hold on. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi and the U.S. Democratic Rep. Debbie Wasserman Schultz spoke about their commitments to the Jewish community and their respective parties' plans to combat anti-Semitism and strengthen ties with Israel at an Israel-American summit attended by thousands on Friday afternoons. Speaking in front of a packed ballroom at a Hollywood Beach resort, Bondi touted the Trump administration's crackdown on anti-Semitic and anti-Israel acts, while Wasserman Schultz reassured attendees that the Democratic Party remains largely pro-Israel despite some far-left dissenters. I am Florida's first Jewish congresswoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz said, adding that the first bill that she passed 21 years ago created the National Jewish American Heritage Month. I am a Zionist. I am a proud Jewish mother, and I represent a significant Jewish community as well as an Israeli-American community proudly. Notice how she said Israeli-American and not American-Israeli. America first, make America great again. It's all empty rhetoric. Over 9 years ago, Debbie Wasserman Schultz faced a bitter reception while addressing Florida's delegates at a breakfast on Monday as a group of Bernie Sanders supporters drowned out the congresswoman with cheers. Shame on you, some yelled, as others accused her of rigging the election in Clinton's favor. Wasserman Schultz, a Zionist Jew, was forced to step down as Democratic National Chair, has ever since been accused as the primary force against the very popular Bernie Sanders, a Jew but not a Zionist. I've said it before, I'll say it again. They're not the same. So being anti-Zionist is not anti-Jew. There's lots of good Jews that are not Zionists. Sanders was polling much higher than Donald Trump during the 2016 presidential race, during the primaries where Sanders squared off against Hillary Clinton, Schultz's choice. Sanders would have easily beaten Trump, if not for the interference of Democratic Zionists like Schultz. Trump's insanity continues even to this day with the help of two AIPAC ass clowns leading the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. We would have never had Trump and would not be teetering on the edge of global financial ruin and would not be party to mass murder and possibly nuclear war right now had it not been for the Zionists like Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the Democratic Party working on behalf of Israel, not America. No wonder Make America Great Again was appealing. No wonder America First was so good to hear coming from a candidate. Too bad those who voted for him the second time didn't learn from his actions and discover his real loyalties during his first term. I suggest the MAGA crowd can keep their red hats and not wear them in so much shame if they just put a question mark after the acronym MAGA. Now back to Bondi. She was finally hired by the Trump Republicans earlier this month, and her White House picture was tossed into a trash can. It is suspected the Republicans are doing all they can to prevent Bondi from appearing before another congressional hearing. I don't know why. The last one went so well for her. We must assume, since AIPAC pretty much owns Congress, certainly the vast majority of Republicans, you can check this out at Track AIPAC, that they don't want any more questions about Epstein and don't want to see her squirm and hiss at questions regarding the attempted assassination of Trump and the assassination of Charlie Cook. There are far too many questions to go over here. I assume you are all aware of them. The last thing the Trump Zionist administration wants is for Bondi to testify under oath before non-Zionist congresspersons. There are two. That's the few that would ask her the right questions. Okay. There are too many other violently pro-Zionist figures in the Trump orbit to delve into. Suffice to say, loony Laura Loomer and the guy who went to jail for embezzling money from Trump's big, beautiful wall during his first term, Steve Bannon. I would venture heck of a lot, of Trump's support comes from the overpaid and overacting anchors at Fox News who get rich by following the pro-Zionist script. The Australian immigrant and media magnate Rupert Murdoch, not a Jew but a Zionist supporter, who also owns the Wall Street Journal, considering the Wall Street stock market is on Wall Street and their boss owns the Wall Street Journal, is it any wonder why the hosts at Fox News put so much stock, sorry for the pun, I just had to, in the daily New York Stock Exchange numbers. In 2010, Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth published a leaked list compiled by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, of whom he considered his best sources of campaign contributions. Murdoch's name appears on the list alongside the designations of, so Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, one of his biggest supporters was Rupert Murdoch of Fox News. Make America Great Again, my ass. Of number two, meaning Netanyahu considered him a close ally and one of the most likely sources of funds. An estimated 98% of Netanyahu's contributions came from abroad, and I wonder if that broad's name is Miriam Adelson. At 93, Murdoch has relinquished much of the day-to-day running of his business to his son Lachlan. Early this year, Lachlan traveled to Israel to meet Netanyahu and former Prime Minister Benny Gantz. While the details of this meeting remain murky, it is clear that support for Israel offensive in Gaza and beyond was a principal topic. So what you're hearing from Fox News is obviously coming from the boss. So this was not the first time the younger Murdoch had met Netanyahu. In 2016, he flew to Israel for secret meetings with the Prime Minister, where, according to local newspaper Haaretz, he attempted to convince Murdoch to purchase Yedioth Ahronoth and to start a Fox News-style TV channel for Israel. In other words, a right-wing propaganda. Netanyahu, however, is far from the only prime minister with a close relationship with the Murdochs. Ariel Sharon, for instance, has enjoyed a decades-long friendship with the Australian mogul. Murdoch stayed with him on his farm and was treated to a helicopter tour of Israel, where the supposed vulnerability of Israel from its hostile neighbors was stressed. I bring this up because Fox News is referred by real journalists as state news, much like Pravda was state news during the Soviet Union era of authoritarian totalitarianism. Fox is friends with Trump, and Trump is friends with Fox. Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura, married to Eric, has her own show on Fox. I know it's so, I just don't care. Hegseth, as mentioned, came from Fox and Friends of Trump to run our military. Came from Fox and Friends. Let me try that again. Hegseth, as mentioned, came from Fox and Friends of Trump to run our military, the greatest, most lethal military in the history of the world, if you remember his boasting. Jeanine Pirro, as the defunct Fox program Justice with Judge Jeanine, is the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. There was a Fox show called The Bottom Line with Dagan and Duffy. The host, Sean Duffy, is now the Secretary of Transportation, while Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, for now, was a paid contributor for Fox News. Dan Bongino, the former Deputy Director of the FBI, once had his own show on Fox Nation. Dr. Mehmet Oz hosted his own popular Emmy-winning show and followed it up with a regular appearance on Fox News. Trump appointed him the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Serving as the U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi has served as a guest co-host of Fox News channels, The Five, on more than one occasion. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. President Donald Trump likes being in the spotlight, whether it's providing the public with the awkward dancing moments or using Inauguration Day to dole out over 22,000 words to the public. He also enjoys a good TV appearance, and he snagged plenty of employees from his favorite places to pop up, Fox News. The Five co-host Kimberly Guilfoyle is the U.S. ambassador to Greece, and Maria Bartiromo, host of Morning with Maria, was appointed to the board of John F. Kennedy's Center for the Performing Arts. Trump has also wandered backstage to pluck a few more people for his administration. Gail Slater was his pick for the Department of Justice Assistant Attorney General for the Antitrust Division, and she was once Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategy at Fox Corporation. The EPA Senior Advisor for Communication job went to Michael Basach, who was a writer at Fox News Channel. Sergio Gore, a booker at Fox News, became the director of the Presidential Personnel Office, and Alex Pfeiffer, once a producer for Tucker Carlson's show on Fox, is now the White House Principal Deputy Communications Director. Even when one of his Fox friends fails in their position, Trump finds a way to keep them aboard. When regular Fox News Channel contributor Mike Waltz mucked up his job as National Security Advisor, Trump nominated him as ambassador to the United Nations before the footprint from his booting had even faded. So this all looks like the Trump administration, his family, all those in his orbit, and Fox News are not really all about Make America Great Again, or even Make America Pretty Good for the first time, or even about America at all. The proof is in the gas prices, the steak prices, cost of living, high inflation, wars upon wars upon wars on the horizon. Are you hearing this, Cuba? It's starting to look like Trump is a big blowhard and always has been. He's bankrupting our country just like he did all his companies. With 195 countries in the world, you have to wonder why America, a nation of most self-proclaimed Christians, or mostly self-proclaimed Christians, are asked to carry so much holy water for one tiny country in the Middle East. Israel is 8,522 square miles, 22,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of New Jersey, our 47th largest state. Israeli citizens enjoy the peace of mind knowing that comes with universal health care. And we can't afford health care here in Make America Great Land because we send billions of dollars to Israel in aid and military assistance. The $3.8 billion annually doesn't count the cost of this Iran debacle that could cost trillions. Trump is calling for a new military budget of $1.5 trillion because we just aren't spending enough. Here are some stats from Wiki on our military budget. On June 11, 2025, the House Armed Services Committee advanced the National Defense Authorization Act, proposed a total authorization of $925 billion, including $878.7 billion specifically for the Department of Defense. Debate in Congress focused on aligning resources to counter rising threats, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, while balancing domestic fiscal pressures. In the end, the overall budget requested by the U.S. Military Department was $961.6 billion, which included $197.4 billion for the Department of the Army, $292.2 billion for the Department of the Navy, $301 billion for the Department of the Air Force, and $170.9 billion for defense-wide expenditures. Just last week, the Senate rejected a measure put forth by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, the Jew who is not a Zionist, to block the sale of military equipment to Israel after 7 Democrats joined Republicans in opposing the resolution in a 40 to 59 vote. We just go ahead and call them 7 AIPAC Democrats. In total, 40 senators supported the resolution on Wednesday. The 7 Democratic senators who voted against the measure were Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, Chris Coons of Delaware, Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Jackie Rosen of Nevada, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York. I believe Chuck Schumer is getting as much money as anybody in the Congress. Maybe there's a few Republicans that are getting more, but hardly. Well, they don't have to pay the Republicans more because they're more willing. So earlier this month, a vote in Congress on the War Powers Resolution aimed at forcing the president to seek approval from Congress to go to war with Iran was defeated along party lines, 215 votes to 214. So the Republican Congress still hasn't seen nor heard enough blathering insanity from the boy king. Not to worry, the Democrats are going to take control, maybe, but what Democrats? With leadership of the Democratic Party such as Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the past and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries ranking at or near the top of AIPAC donations, nothing is assured, other than they and their ilk in both parties and the left center and right center need to continue coming together in recognition that Trump administration and Fox as official Zionist propaganda outlet are not making America great, not even close. And in Trump's first term, we always had the Zionists there too. This is why voting for him the second time should not have happened. There's no more excuses. Sorry, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State during Trump's first term. He's regarded as evangelical Christian Zionist. Pompeo paid a supposedly private visit to the West Bank on November 19th, thereby becoming the first U.S. Secretary of State to set foot on the West Bank since it was captured by Israel during the 1967 Six Days War. That's the war that they tried to sink the USS Liberty. Better look that up if you're not familiar with that. Pompeo that was a U.S. Naval ship, Israel tried to sink allegedly to drag the United States into war on their side against Egypt. And that's when they annexed all those properties. Look it up. Pompeo went to Pesgat, a Jewish settlement near Ramallah, built on privately owned Palestinian land seized by Israel years ago for security purpose, and then repurposed for its construction. Regarding the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement worldwide, Pompeo spoke to a group in Jerusalem on December 2020. The United States government will formally designate the anti-Israel boycott movement anti-Semitic and immediately start cracking down on groups affiliated with it. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Thursday during a visit to Israel, calling BDS a cancer. Today, I want to make one announcement with respect to the decision by the State Department that we will regard the global anti-Israel BDS campaign as anti-Semitic. So he said, standing next to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during a joint statement of the press. So in other words, if you don't believe in what Israel is doing, then you're anti-Jew. That's not going to work any longer. That's not working anymore. The left center, the left right have figured it out. It's just empty rhetoric. John Bolton was Trump's national security advisor in 2018, and this is all still going back to Trump's first term. National security advisor John Bolton was Trump's national security advisor in 2018 and 2019, but he's no longer a Trump fan, and the feeling is mutual. More on this below, but Bolton is a big fan of Israel-first policy. In 2015, the Zionist Organization of America, ZOA, gave John Bolton a standing ovation when he said he wanted to be U.S. president. In 2018, the ZOA gave him its Defender of Israel Award. Not Defender of America. Keep this in mind, Defender of Israel Award. Bolton's track record as a preemptive war fiend and his contempt for much of the Muslim world are deeply rooted and may be best reflected in his unflinching support for Israel's military operations and posturing in the Middle East. Bolton will presumably support whatever military action Israel wants to take in Syria and elsewhere, framing it as being in America's natural interest. Make America great again? ? Indeed, Bolton's bellicose approach to foreign policy, chiefly his adamant calls to bomb Iran, contempt for the United Nations, vehement opposition to the Iran nuclear deal, and anti-Muslim sentiments are all remarkably similar to those of the Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's. And this is from Wikipedia. Bolton is widely considered a foreign policy hawk and advocates military action and regime change by the U.S. in Iran, Syria, Libya, Venezuela, Cuba, Yemen, and North Korea. A member of the Republican Party, his political views have been described as American nationalist, conservative, and neoconservative, although Bolton rejects the last term. He is a former senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a Fox News Channel commentator. Well, of course he is. Back to Bolton versus Trump feud. January 30th, that was back in the day there, former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton excoriated former President, this is about 20 to 21, as an utterly excoriated former President Donald Trump as utterly self-interested man who would punish personal enemies and appease adversaries of Russia and China in a new edition of his memoir released on Tuesday. Bolton accused the Republican presidential frontrunner of having no political philosophy or coherent policy outlook. If re-elected, Trump could leave, this is his quote, Trump could leave the NATO security alliance, curb support to Ukraine despite Russia's 2020 invasion, embolden China to blockade Taiwan, and generally pursue isolationism. Bolton warned, Trump is unfit to be president. Bolton wrote in a few new forward to The Room Where It Happened, his account of the 17 months he spent as Trump's national security advisor. In his first 4 years were bad, a second 4 will be worse. How prophetic. While Trump casts himself as the underdog's champion, once saying, for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution, Bolton argues he is fundamentally self-regarding. Trump really cares only about retribution for himself and will consume much of his second term. He wrote in the foreword of the paperback edition of his memoir, which painted a bleak picture of America during his second term. Again, I will say, how prophetic. Bolton may be a radical warmongering Zionist, but he's not wrong on this. And to conclude, of all of these Zionists in the Trump orbit, and we haven't even mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and her Mossad father, Robert Maxwell, that Trump and the compromised international wealthy globalists would dare start a war with Iran just to appease the greater Israeli Zionists and to distract from an international pedophile scandal, it should be self-evident. That's it.